Next up is the winner of the Higher Education and Research category, and this is a multi-team led by Lions. Welcome.
Well, good morning, everybody. Slight change of pace from that last extraordinary presentation. I'm presenting on behalf of a creative collaboration of 4 architectural practices: Lions, the Fulcrum Agency, Officer Woods, and Silver Thomas Hanley. The project is called Bula Katajan. This is from the language of the Indigenous people of the southwest corner of the Australian continent, the Noongar people, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to any other First Nations peoples that are in the audience this morning. The term Bula Katajan translates to many places of learning, and it has in fact been a site for learning for 65,000 years for that community. It's a project for a public university in Australia called Murdoch University, and the site itself is what in colloquial terms in Australia we call a bush campus, built on the fringe of a city in landscape. And in fact the project was built almost exclusively at one time during the 1970s by a single architect, and a series of linear buildings within that landscape, or so-called bush landscape. And we were invited to speculate on really 3 things within the project. Firstly, how to accommodate new teaching and learning spaces for students that would secure the future of the university for students, which is both local and many international students, and also to deal with some intractable issues with the campus. As the city has migrated towards the campus, the public transport network changed, and suddenly students are arriving at what used to be the back door of the campus, and in arriving at that point, it's a 14-metre rise from that arrival point to the centre of the campus. So we proposed an idea of a nearly 200-metre long building, which we thought amplified the idea of the existing linear typologies on this campus, and really literally stretches the building to connect the centre of the campus on the top of this slide to the new arrival point towards the bottom of this slide, and also deal with a series of transverse connections that start to link the campus together in the cross direction. And so I'll talk about the project in 3 parts. Firstly, the project is like a large bit of public campus student infrastructure connecting the campus from the centre to the edge. But it's also a building with very intimate teaching and learning spaces where students can work together. And also, we've brought the idea of biophilic design directly into the project through a mass timber structure. So in a sense, the project, which sits on a concrete base, is an idea of 31 repeating 6-metre bays of a mass timber structure. So it's like a big warehouse for students to learn within. And you can see in this image this idea of connecting the centre of the campus to the new arrival point, and that very significant rise of levels on the left-hand side of this image, and also in this view as well. So when you now arrive on the campus, this is what you arrive to. So we expanded the idea of an existing architectural language on the campus, which was for these supported propped eaves, and made that into a more monumental scale that suited the idea of recreating the arrival point into the campus for this university. As you then step into that space, you can now arrive onto the campus under cover for sun and or weather protection, or you can divert into a more protected colonnade you can see on the right-hand side of this image. Or alternatively, you can not pass by the building but simply engage with the building and the vertical circulation systems within it in order to provide universal access through the building into the centre of the campus, and also into all of the teaching and learning spaces within that project. And that's an image of those circulation systems that connect together also a whole range of student spaces that I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in one moment. And you rise up into the building, and then you can actually pass through the building, circulate through the teaching and learning spaces into the campus, and arrive into what is the traditional centre of the campus. And from that centre, which was designed in the 1970s, it's called Bush Court. When you step out of that courtyard space and engage with the building from this direction, It's just a very simple, almost like a single level long span space, which is provided for students for their activities, whether or not it's markets or events or orientation type activities, for what is a very harsh and hot climate in Western Australia. And it's a very long span from a timber structure, so the structure in fact was tested to destruction to confirm that it could all work. And this is an image of the actual opening of the building, with a large crowd being able to take advantage of that deep shade within that central space. And indeed, an opening ceremony conducted by the Noongar elders, a smoking ceremony for the opening and completion of the construction of the project. And from that space, to step into the building, on the right-hand side, you can see the campus circulation systems. To the left-hand side, to step into the building, into some of the student spaces. Firstly, there is spaces which are set aside for delivering student services, ranging from paying library fines to engaging with support for international students in a very intimate one-on-one engaging space. And that's connected with a space which can flip between student use and teaching and learning, and looks back out onto that large undercover event space. And before we were even invited to do the design work on the project, we were also asked to do an educational brief, and we looked at the 1970s buildings, which are very narrow buildings, and the teaching spaces were largely in the traditional large lecture theatres or small tutorial spaces. And we proposed that the building would actually have a series of larger scale spaces where students can work collaboratively together in a large format series of teaching and learning spaces. So we developed a series of spaces conceptually where students can be accessing technology or avoiding technology in terms of the way they learn together. And again, these are students that are both local students and other students from all corners of the globe working collaboratively in sizes which are unusual, of 60 students or 90 students or 120 students within those single buildings. So it's a pretty simple linear plan for the project, but if I close up into one central section of that, within the repeat 6 metre timber grid, we're able to accommodate these formal teaching and learning spaces, which are accessed from more social student spaces, which are both naturally ventilated and also can use tempered air. And between those, a series of what are called student halls, where students can hang between classes and do, again, informal learning activities with their peers before they actually attend more formal learning activities. To reduce the energy footprint of the project, we put all the air delivery systems in an underfloor system, so that within the space itself, in doing a mass timber structure, we really permeated the idea of the timber, I guess from a biophilic design point of view, for the student experience. This is a typical teaching and learning spaces where students can congregate and do work around tables of 6, or they can sit across a corner and pair up and do teaching and learning, or indeed as a whole larger scale class using technology as well, and more technology enhanced spaces. These are the student halls. Again, these were designed in a way where students can, at the start of a learning year, work more collaboratively, and as it gets closer to pressure time and exams, enough space in the setup that they can do individual study within those student halls. And from that, you can migrate into more social spaces. These are places where students can chill out with digital technologies. We commissioned through the university a series of First Nation artists to do digital artwork that go into these spaces, and other social spaces which are more like external picnic areas that connect to student kitchens, which again can be naturally ventilated, and you can also connect and break out to a series of external balcony spaces, which from the outside is like a series of network of student spaces that are easily identifiable and easily accessed via the vertical circulation systems. And when you go onto those systems and up to the topmost level, within this idea of a really simple, large, broad roof, which provides deep shade in summer, weather protection during the winter. Students can either sit outside for their learning activities under that deep roof, or they can step inside into other informal learning spaces to work with their colleagues, or from that to step into some of the larger format teaching spaces, which again can be set up so they're both didactic learning with someone running learning activities within that space, or they can be more group learning using technologies. And the last couple of slides to say the design takes advantage of the simple gable roof to create these beautiful teaching and learning spaces that reconnect back out into that bush landscape at towards the edge of the city. And that also gives an opportunity with this extraordinary roof to do some other significant things from a sustainable design point of view, with about a 500 kilowatt array of PV cells on the roof, which allows the project to achieve roughly 90 to 95% reduction in its operational energy use for the project, and with the use of things like the mass timber structure, do a very significant reduction in excess of 50% of the embodied carbon within the project as well. So, thank you.
I think it's all very healthy. It's beautifully large spaces. It's Australia at its best in that respect. It appears to be technologically up to the moment. It's timber. There's a lot of it. And that's the bit that I wonder about. There's, dare I say, a certain relentlessness of it. It's in all of its efficiencies, and it's, you know, it's a highly civilized place. But there's a lot of it, and we've seen several projects this morning of which there is quite a lot, of which there's even repetition. But if the last project that we saw was slightly cloying even in its degree of charm, I think yours has very little charm, dare I be so opinionated. It's healthy. It's like a sort of good scrub, you know, good shower or a healthy meal. And you think, where's the mustard, you know? And I have that feeling now. I'm intrigued as to whether the notion of a bush, I mean, I've experienced a few Australian campuses, as you know, whether a bush campus is in that special category of campus which it is to provide for the many and doesn't have the funding to be particular. But is it just a question of funding? Because we've also seen this morning examples of where there wasn't much funding either, but somehow there's a, I have to again overuse this term charm, which I know is a loaded word, but it's also to do with, you mentioned incident, and I look at the incident, I say, yeah, there's a bit of a funny thing in the ceiling here, so I suppose you'd know about it. Rather like those relentless German airports where you look for something that makes you want to stop. I know is rather open criticism. Maybe my colleagues will disagree with me. Maybe they will.
Is there a question in there, Peter?
No, not really. Well, it's an implicit question, of course.
Yeah. Sometimes the jurors, we don't make questions. We make comments. Yeah, I would like to comment in this case because I like very much the project. Now, I was thinking that somehow before we saw this project of offices in India, that was very much a kind of rational, Le Corbusier, modern building. And this one is another kind of modern building, but in a kind of upgrade way. Because, I mean, first of all, you have a very interesting way to enter to this kind of campus by doing a building that is creating also some kind of congregation, no? From the small buildings to a kind of larger building. And then somehow you have also a kind of modern structure, but this time is using a new material like the timber, like the mass timber. And then what I like very much is to discover, I mean, the way you develop the project, like having many, many, many different kind of scales of spaces below one single roof, no? So I think that this is something that gives an incredible value where you keep the small scale of the campus that you can find around into a single building and create some kind of feeling of a scale that maybe in the small campus we cannot find, no? How many students can be there in the building?
It's 16,500 square metres of space, so there's about 3,000 students that could occupy the
3,000 students. Yeah, so congratulations. I think it's a fantastic project. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm from Perth, so I'm very familiar with the Murdoch campus. I was really curious to find out how, because I think we've often seen collaborations with like 2 architects or sometimes 3, but here you have 5 different parties who collaborated. Could you share a little bit about how you managed the design collaboration?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, it partly answers the first commentary by Peter. So we established this idea of the simple warehouse structure of 31 repeat bays. And at that point, we were also going, well, how do you deal with this idea of the repetitive system? So at that point, we invited other architects, smaller practices, emerging practices to participate in the collaboration, and more or less gave them like 2 bays each within that structure to say, well, you speculate in your own way within that grid of timber structure and develop your own authorship and ideas in relation to that, in order to do the idea that you can bring within the unity of the structure some idea of diversity in both architectural language and experience in the project.
Okay, thank you.
Very good presentation. Thank you very much. I'm struggling with a bit of the brief on this project because you've created some fantastic spaces for the students, but you started your presentation by saying you went to link to the center of the campus, which is interesting. What I struggle with is the fact that there's an existing campus with existing buildings, existing spaces. Was the brief for you to create more space or to actually link to the existing spaces and partly improve them? The images you've shown of the building is great, and the spaces is fantastic, structure, fantastic. But the question in my mind is this building to link to the center or to actually create more space for the university? And if it's to create more space for the university, what about the existing campuses? Was there any idea by the client to improve those spaces or add to them rather than creating a new one?
Yeah. So the simple paradigm is the university is growing in its student numbers. So the existing buildings don't have the capacity to provide the sorts of spaces that this new building can provide. So in building the new building that makes other space available within the existing buildings that can be refurbished for other activities, including academic accommodation and the like. So the brief was 2 parts. It was to be this idea of solving some of the issues with the campus, right, but at the same time providing significant amount of new space for students particularly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.